When power clashes with dignity, the fateful airport confrontation, and the badge that changed everything. Aurora Heights International Airport felt like a colossal pressure cooker, where frantic footsteps merged with urgent announcements echoing overhead. Every second counted as you navigated crowded terminals, dodging rolling suitcases and trying not to spill your hot morning coffee. Amidst this daily chaos, a sudden commotion erupted near Gate D12. A white security officer, rigid in his posture, stopped a black woman. His voice was laced with dry authority, while hers was tinged with disbelief and indignation. Nearby travelers paused, curious, watching as tension crackled in the air. Little did they know, this woman was no ordinary passenger, and the small metal badge she carried was about to change everything, upending the officer's life forever. The day had begun at 4:30 a.m. when the sharp screech of an alarm clock tore through the quiet darkness. Maya Johnson groaned softly, reluctantly peeling herself from the cocoon of warm blankets. Another early flight, another airport lounge, another day juggling responsibilities that demanded her full attention. The sky was still a deep blue, punctuated by the glow of streetlights, as Maya drove towards Aurora Heights International Airport. As the newly appointed senior vice president at Global Airways, Maya was accustomed to the rigors of airport life. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect just by walking into a room. Tall, with sharp, angular features, and hair styled in neat professional braids. She often wore meticulously tailored suits that spoke of both style and no-nonsense ambition. Despite her serious demeanor, Maya always greeted every airport employee she encountered with a bright smile. She understood that success wasn't solely about personal achievements, but also about uplifting those around her. This morning, however, she was racing against time. A crucial meeting in San Francisco awaited her presence, and she was determined not to be late. Navigating the airport's labyrinthine pathways had become second nature to Maya. She had done it thousands of times. But today, something felt different. Tension permeated the air. The usual hum of travelers was overshadowed by announcements of flight delays and gate changes. Exhausted faces dragged suitcases, children whined, and even the flight information displays flickered ominously. Through it all, Maya maintained her composure. She skillfully weaved past slow walkers, strollers, and traveling families. Anyone observant could see she was a seasoned traveler, each movement efficient and purposeful. She clutched her carry-on bag, readjusting the strap of her laptop case. Her airline credentials, tucked safely in her purse, remained out of view. She never flaunted her position unless absolutely necessary. Had Maya known the storm she was about to walk into, perhaps she would have paused for another coffee or taken a deep breath to steel herself. But the universe had a twist waiting, one that would transform her routine morning into a head-on collision with injustice. Stepping off the escalator, Maya spotted her gate down the hallway. She felt a rush of relief that she was making good time. Her flight to San Francisco was scheduled to depart in just over an hour, and she even had a moment to grab some breakfast. The faint aroma of coffee pulled her toward a nearby kiosk, where she joined a short line of bleary-eyed passengers. The barista called out for the next person. Maya stepped forward, placing her order with practiced efficiency, a large latte and a simple bagel. While waiting, her eyes drifted around the concourse. People from every walk of life hurried by. Business travelers with laptops tucked under their arms, Vacationers in flip-flops, families herding excited children. Each person had a destination. Each carried a story that would unfold somewhere else. Lost in thought, she barely noticed when a middle-aged white man in a wrinkled polo shirt squeezed in front of her. He snapped at the barista that it was his turn, completely ignoring Maya's presence. Something in his tone was abrasive, but Maya chose not to engage. She had bigger concerns, like getting on the plane and making her meeting. She gave him a polite nod, letting him order first. In her experience, small conflicts at an airport usually weren't worth fueling. When her turn came, she retrieved her latte and bagel, offering a friendly smile to the barista. She said thank you and stepped aside. Turning back into the flow of foot traffic, Maya felt the subtle tension that often arose in busy, chaotic spaces. Airports had a knack for exposing the raw edges of people's anxieties, but she didn't dwell on it, instead focusing on the day ahead. In passing, she glimpsed the same man fumbling with his phone, staring angrily at her, then at the barista. Before she could decipher his expression, the crowd swept her forward. She balanced her coffee and bagel, heading straight for her gate. Her mind was already on the meeting in San Francisco, the presentation slides she needed to finalize, and the phone calls she had to make once she landed. She had no idea that this brief, tense encounter was just a tiny drop in the tumultuous sea about to engulf her. Because waiting around the next corner was a far more hostile confrontation, one that would test her patience, her dignity, and her resilience. Although Maya had already passed through the main security checks thanks to her frequent flyer status and pre-check privileges, an unexpected mandatory secondary screening area suddenly appeared in her path. Airport staff had set up this additional checkpoint near the gates due to heightened security alerts, a rare procedure, but not unheard of. The line moved sluggishly, beginning to chip away at Maya's carefully maintained schedule. Glancing at her watch, she realized she had about 45 minutes before her flight. Anxiety threatened to bubble up. She despised being late. Still, she steadied her breath and reminded herself that the worst-case scenario was just a delay. She was a flexible problem solver, trained to navigate curveballs. As she approached the checkpoint, she noticed an airport security officer barking instructions at people in line. Only a few feet away, she realized the officer was singling out certain passengers for more intensive questioning. Maya's heartbeat quickened. She'd witnessed racial profiling in airports before, had even been the target once or twice, but she reminded herself not to jump to conclusions. Perhaps the officer had a legitimate reason for pulling people aside. Eventually, the officer motioned for Maya to step forward. He wore a crisp uniform and a hardened expression that gave nothing away. His name tag read Officer Miller. He demanded her ID and ticket, extending a gloved hand. Maya offered her boarding pass and driver's license. She gave him a polite smile, deciding to remain calm. "Here you go," she said, hoping his day was going okay. He peered at the documents, then back at her face, his gaze lingering a moment too long, uncomfortably. He asked where she was headed. "San Francisco," she answered, keeping her voice level. His scrutinizing eyes flickered with suspicion. "Traveling alone?" "Yes, for work." Officer Miller cocked his head. "And what work is that?" Maya paused. She was accustomed to standard security questions, but something about his tone unsettled her. It felt less like protocol and more like an interrogation. Still, she answered softly, "I work for Global Airways." He nodded slowly, face still impassive. "Step over here," he said, pointing to an area off to the side flanked by retractable belts. She obeyed, shooting a glance at the other passengers who had breezed through without such questioning. Maya told herself to stay patient. She had been through plenty of security checks in her career and knew her credentials would clear any concerns, assuming this was standard procedure. But the ominous weight in her chest hinted otherwise. Trouble was brewing. In the cordoned-off area, Maya expected a swift process, perhaps a basic pat-down or a check of her carry-on. But instead, Officer Miller questioned her with disconcerting intensity. He asked her why she'd chosen this particular flight, where she would be staying in San Francisco, and even the nature of her meeting. When she tried to explain that it was a corporate responsibility, the officer appeared either unconvinced or entirely uninterested. Her watch ticked incessantly in her mind. With each question, time slipped away. She hadn't even had the chance to check her emails or finalize her presentation. A small queue began to form behind her as passengers looked on with curiosity and a dash of sympathy in their eyes. Maya watched as a young Latina woman in line whispered to her traveling companion. Their concerned expressions suggested they knew exactly what this looked like. A woman of color being singled out for no discernible reason. The air felt thick with tension. Eventually, Maya mustered enough confidence to gently speak up. "Officer," she said, "I have a flight to catch in less than 40 minutes. Could we please expedite this process?" His only response was a harsh stare. "You'll wait until I'm done," he retorted. She exhaled slowly, trying to keep her composure. She had worked too hard to climb the ranks in a competitive industry to let her temper flare publicly. She didn't want to give him any excuse to escalate the situation further. Yet the questioning continued, probing, prying, edging into invasive territory. Miller even hinted that Maya's conduct seemed evasive, suggesting she might be hiding something. Meanwhile, other travelers zipped past them, occasionally glancing with confusion at the scene. After nearly 15 minutes of interrogation, Maya decided enough was enough. She respectfully stated, "Officer, if there's a legitimate concern, please explain it. Otherwise, I'd like to speak to a supervisor, and I'd like to be on my way. I'm due for a critical work engagement." Officer Miller's face twisted into a sneer. He motioned for another security officer to join them and quietly conferred with him for a few moments. Then he turned back to Maya, adopting a patronizing tone. "You're free to go for now," he said, handing her ID and boarding pass back with a glare that promised this wouldn't be the last of it. Maya felt a wave of relief, but also a hint of dread. Aware that these few minutes might foreshadow a much larger conflict still to come. Approaching gate D12, the last tendrils of tension eased from Maya's shoulders. She glanced at the overhead clock, 25 minutes before her flight to San Francisco was scheduled to depart. Relief blossomed in her chest. Despite the extra security checks and the tense exchange with Officer Miller, she had made it to the gate with enough time to spare. She could already imagine settling into her seat, reviewing her notes for the meeting, and letting the gentle hum of the airplane engines lull her into a moment of peace. The gate area, however, was unusually crowded. Groups of travelers congregated around every available seat, some nervously pacing, while others clutched steaming cups of coffee and pastry bags. Maya navigated around a couple arguing over a misplaced boarding pass, sidestepping a small child sprawled across the floor with coloring books. Even amid the chaos, she told herself that she was almost in the clear. The worst, she hoped, was behind her. Reaching the priority line, she presented her boarding pass to a gate agent, a young woman named Sophia with a neat bob and empathetic eyes. "Good morning," Maya said, offering a polite smile. The agent returned the greeting and gave her ticket a quick scan. For a fleeting moment, Maya thought everything would proceed smoothly. She would board, stow her carry-on, and perhaps even have time to organize her meeting notes before takeoff. But just as the scanner beeped in approval, a commotion behind her snapped her attention away. A familiar face stormed into view. The same middle-aged man in the wrinkled polo shirt who had created tension back at the coffee kiosk. His expression looked more hostile than before, and a thin sheen of sweat glistened at his temples. To Maya's disbelief, he wasn't alone. Trailing several steps behind him was Officer Miller, the very officer who had grilled her during the secondary security check. "Miss, I need you to step aside," Officer Miller barked, his tone brooking no argument. He marched straight up to the counter, causing Sophia to halt mid-scan. Her brows drew together in confusion as she glanced between Maya and the uniformed officer. Maya took a measured breath, trying to hold on to her composure. "Officer," she stated, "I've already been cleared by security." "What is this about?" The man in the polo shirt interjected, jabbing an accusing finger in Maya's direction. "She threatened me back at the coffee shop, told me I'd regret cutting in front of her. She said something like, 'You don't know who I am. Watch your back.' That's a warning if I've ever heard one." An audible gasp rippled through the small crowd lining up to board. Passengers turned curious or weary gazes on Maya, and she felt her cheeks grow hot under the collective scrutiny. Her pulse throbbed at her temples. She had said no such thing. But how could she prove it in this swirling sea of he said, she said? "That's not true," Maya managed, her voice cracking slightly. The injustice of the accusation collided with her frustration, threatening to fray her composure. "I never spoke to you at the coffee kiosk. I certainly never threatened you. If you believe differently, we can ask the barista who served us." Officer Miller's eyes narrowed, and though he showed no obvious sign of triumph, Maya sensed an undercurrent of self-righteousness in his stance. "I take allegations of threats very seriously," he said in a cold, measured tone, especially at an airport. "We can't allow anyone who might be disruptive or dangerous onto a plane." Sophia glanced at Maya's boarding pass, her expression torn. She seemed hesitant to block Maya from boarding, particularly after the earlier security fiasco. But Miller's presence left her with little choice. "Officer," she said quietly, "if you feel it's necessary to investigate further." "It is," Miller interrupted, cutting her off. He stared at Maya. "Until we can verify the man's claim, you won't be allowed to board." Maya felt a surge of anger at the high-handedness. "Verify," she echoed, her voice taut. "It's a false accusation and easily disproven by anyone who was there." "This is completely unfair." The man in the polo shirt continued to play the victim, shifting his body as though physically recoiling from Maya. "I'm worried for my safety," he declared loudly, his voice echoing around the gate area. Her behavior seemed so out of control. She was furious, muttering threats. Maya swallowed the indignation rising in her throat. "Officer, please, let's talk to the barista or check the surveillance footage. This is clearly a misunderstanding, or frankly, a lie." Miller folded his arms. We'll see about that. But until then, step away from the line. Any hope of boarding that flight vanished the moment Miller uttered those words. She saw Sophia nervously motion for the next passenger to come forward. While Maya stood there helpless, a swirl of emotions churned in her chest. Disbelief, fury, humiliation. Around them, travelers edged closer, murmuring among themselves. A few threw sympathetic looks in Maya's direction, but no one dared to challenge the officer directly. "Officer," Sophia interjected softly, "it might be best if you conduct this investigation away from the boarding area. We're about to begin final call, and the other passengers—" "Of course," Miller said, his tone snapping with authority. He turned to Maya. "Come with me, Ms. Johnson. We need to sort this out, and we'll do so in a private setting." Maya had no choice but to comply. She grabbed her carry-on bag, shooting one last glance at Sophia, who looked both apologetic and powerless. The heavy disappointment of missing her flight settled like a weight in Maya's stomach. She was painfully aware that time was ticking, and the critical meeting in San Francisco would soon begin without her. As Miller led her away from gate D12, Maya's shoulders sagged. She found herself replaying the incident at the coffee kiosk in her head, searching for anything that could have been misconstrued. She remembered offering no more than a polite smile and a gracious step aside when the man forced his way ahead. How had such an inconsequential moment transformed into this spiraling nightmare? With each step away from the gate, resentment and sorrow sharpened inside her. She wanted to lash out, to demand her rights as a passenger and as a human being. But she knew better than to let anger guide her words. In an airport, especially when confronted by an officer, one misstep could shift the entire narrative against her. Silent and tense, she trailed behind Miller. Her mind spun with thoughts of her soon-departing flight, the presentation in SF, and the growing fear that she was being singled out for reasons she couldn't control. Somewhere beneath the anxiety, though, a spark of defiance flared. She was innocent, and she intended to prove it. If that meant turning to her corporate connections or going through official channels, so be it. For now, she steeled herself against the looming interrogation, determined not to be cast as the villain in a stranger's lie. So began a new chapter in her day. A disheartening detour she never could have anticipated when she first arrived at the airport, brimming with professional focus and self-assured calm. The weight of 100 stares pressed in from all sides. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked around, desperate to find a glimmer of support. A few passengers eyed her sympathetically, but most were confused and concerned, anxious not to miss their own flights. Sophia, the gate agent, appeared visibly torn. She stepped forward, rechecking Maya's boarding pass and ID. "Ma'am, you're a valued customer here," Sophia explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "But we have to cooperate with security." Officer Miller cleared his throat. "This gentleman says you threatened him. We take allegations like that seriously. Step away from the gate and come with me." Maya could barely believe the turn of events. She glanced at the man who'd made the false accusation. She recalled how he'd glared at her in line for coffee, likely annoyed that she'd been helped before him even though he had cut in front of her. But to claim she'd threatened him, it was absurd. Tamping down her anger, Maya spoke with as much calm as she could muster. "Officer, that's simply not true. I never exchanged a single word with him. Please, let's check surveillance footage or ask the barista. you'll see there was no altercation. The officer didn't budge. That's exactly what I intend to do, but until then, we can't risk letting a potentially disruptive passenger board. Please come with me. Sophia flashed Maya an apologetic look, clearly sensing the injustice but restricted by protocol. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat and followed Officer Miller out of the boarding area. Behind her, a few of the other travelers openly voiced their disbelief, but the officer ignored their mutters. They traversed the winding corridors until they arrived at a more private area near security offices. The man in the wrinkled polo shirt trailed smugly behind, occasionally casting triumphant glances at Maya. Every fiber of her being wanted to protest, to fight back right there in the hallway. But she knew better. Airport security had significant authority, and any misstep on her part could escalate the situation dangerously. Quietly, she told herself to remain collected. She was innocent, and truth had a way of surfacing eventually. Yet a pit gnawed at her stomach, the bitter realization that she was being targeted. The question now was why, and how far would this go? The interior of the airport security office was a stark contrast to the bright concourse. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating bland walls and rows of uncomfortable chairs. A metal desk dominated the center of the room, behind which sat another airport security official, older and more composed than Miller. His nameplate read Sergeant Davies. Officer Miller wasted no time launching into a summary of the incident. A traveler had alleged that Maya issued a threatening statement, potential intimidation, and suspicious behavior at the coffee kiosk. The man who lodged the complaint stood off to the side, his arms folded, smug satisfaction radiating off him. Maya fought to keep her emotions in check. She countered each accusation calmly. I said nothing to him, threatened no one. The barista can confirm that our only interaction was when he cut in front of me, and I let it slide. I even waited patiently for him to place his order. Sergeant Davies nodded gravely, flipping open a small notepad. We'll need to check surveillance footage from that kiosk area. That may take a while. Maya felt her pulse slow, a faint glimmer of hope sparking. Footage would exonerate her, no question. Thank you, she said. I'm more than willing to wait if that means clearing my name. And in the meantime, the other man interjected, she should be denied boarding. What if she poses a threat to other passengers? Maya turned to him, incredulous. A threat? You cut in front of me to order coffee, and I didn't even speak to you. Why are you doing this? He scoffed. I'm just reporting what I heard. You were muttering under your breath. I think it's suspicious. The blatant lie made Maya's blood boil. Yet Sergeant Davies maintained a neutral expression. We'll let the footage speak for itself, he said. Then to Miller. Officer, bring Ms. Johnson to a waiting area. Let's do this by the book. Officer Miller gave a clipped nod. Maya's heart pounded. She glanced at her watch. Her flight would be leaving in minutes. The inevitable realization sank in. She was going to miss it. The personal humiliation of being forcibly removed from the gate was bad enough, but now she was jeopardizing her critical business meeting in San Francisco. Still, she suppressed her fury. She couldn't let emotions take over, not in front of these officers. Demonstrating composure was her best path to proving her innocence. But deep inside, she felt a simmering sense of betrayal by the very system she once believed in. She was used to seeing "see something, say something" campaigns encouraging vigilance at airports, Today, that principle had been twisted into a weapon against her, fueled by prejudice and one man's fabricated complaint. While Maya was being escorted into the security office, events were unfolding at Global Airways' corporate offices that would eventually ripple back to the airport. In a sleek, glass-walled conference room, managers and administrators were gathering for an urgent call, which Maya was supposed to attend from San Francisco. At the head of the table sat David Chen, Global Airways' Executive Vice President of Operations. He shuffled through a stack of reports, frowning. Maya was a star player in the organization. Her leadership style was widely admired, and her insights had proven invaluable. Chen knew this upcoming meeting was critical, not just for Maya's career, but for an important expansion deal in the works with a major West Coast partner. But as the meeting start time approached, Maya's seat remained empty. At first, everyone assumed she might be on a plane with limited Wi-Fi. Then minutes turned to half an hour, and still no word from Maya. Calls to her cell phone went straight to voicemail. Concern began to brew among her colleagues. One of Maya's direct reports, a diligent manager named Priya Singh, noticed her boss's absence and grew worried. Maya was never late, especially not for something this important. Priya tried texting again, but there was no response. She remembered that Maya had an early flight. Maybe something had gone wrong at the airport. Sensing rising anxiety in the room, Chen tapped on his phone. "I'll call the airport," he said quietly to Priya. "We have staff there who might be able to track down what's happening." As a senior executive, Chen had direct lines of communication with gate agents, airport managers, and a variety of support personnel. If Maya were detained or delayed, he would find out quickly enough, and if the situation warranted, he was prepared to escalate it immediately. In the back of his mind, Chen hoped it was just a simple delay or a minor oversight. Perhaps a mechanical issue with the plane or a gate change that messed up Maya's schedule. But he couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something else was amiss. Maya was too organized, too meticulous to let a small hurdle derail her entire day without notifying anyone. Little did he know, somewhere in the vast corridors of Aurora Heights, one of his most promising senior leaders was being held back by an unnecessary ordeal, one rooted in bias and lies, soon to explode into a scandal that would put both the airport's and the airline's reputations on the line. Maya was led to a small waiting area adjacent to the security office, a cramped room furnished with cold metal chairs and a single table that held old magazines. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, heightening the sense of unease. Officer Miller stood at the doorway, arms folded, watching her every move like a hawk. Maya set her carry-on on the floor, then tried to reclaim her composure. She was furious at how quickly a groundless claim had escalated into a full-blown interrogation. Yet she also recognized that anger would do her no favors here. Time dragged. She glanced at her phone. 8:05 a.m. Her flight was scheduled to depart at 8:10 a.m. By now, the plane was surely finalizing its boarding procedures. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling a shaky breath. She thought of the meticulously prepared slides on her laptop, the SF boardroom that would be missing her critical insights. At length, Sergeant Davies appeared, stepping carefully into the room. He approached Maya, speaking in a measured tone. "We've requested the surveillance footage from the coffee shop area. That system is managed by the airport's Central Security Department. It could take a little while." Maya nodded, forcing politeness. Thank you. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help speed this up. He offered a non-committal shrug and then added, The man who accused you has been asked to remain as well, so we can interview him further. This is standard procedure. Maya appreciated at least that level of fairness. Perhaps they weren't taking his word at face value. I'd also like to note that I work for Global Airways, she said carefully, in a senior leadership capacity. If you need to verify my identity or speak to my superiors, they can confirm my background. My ID and credentials are in my bag. Sergeant Davies studied her for a moment. Let's see how the footage turns out first. Though Maya could hardly blame him for maintaining procedure, the tension in her gut refused to dissipate. She sensed Miller's disapproving glare from behind her, as though her very presence offended him. She tried to distract herself by checking emails, but the phone's battery was dangerously low. Her charger was in her carry-on, and she wasn't sure if they'd even allow her to plug it in. So she resigned herself to waiting, each minute feeling like an hour, frustration building inside her with nowhere to go. Outside that claustrophobic room, unbeknownst to Maya, a chain of events had already been set in motion. Calls were being made, eyebrows were being raised, and soon the truth would unravel in spectacular fashion. At Global Airways' operations desk near the main concourse, a senior customer service supervisor named Leo Martinez had just taken a call from David Chen's office. Leo was known for his no-nonsense approach and impeccable track record of customer advocacy. He immediately began his inquiry, checking flight manifests, gate logs, and any record that might explain why Maya Johnson, one of their own senior executives, had not boarded her flight. It didn't take him long to glean that Maya had been removed from the gate area due to a security dispute. He recognized the name at once. Maya Johnson was a rising star at the company, someone Leo had admired from a distance for her operational efficiencies and inclusive leadership programs. Alarm bells went off in Leo's head. This didn't sound like Maya at all. She was the consummate professional, and any kind of disruptive behavior accusation seemed wildly out of character. If anything, Maya was known for diffusing tense situations, not causing them. Leo placed a call to the airport security division. After explaining who he was and why he was calling, he encountered immediate pushback. The officer on the other line insisted they couldn't discuss an ongoing security matter. But Leo was relentless. He had a direct line to Global Airways' upper management and wasn't about to be stonewalled. Meanwhile, David Chen had also ramped up the pressure from the corporate side. Within an hour, multiple calls from Global Airways' legal department and executive offices were directed toward the airport's head of security, emphasizing the urgency and seriousness of detaining a senior airline executive under questionable pretenses. All this activity reverberated through the halls of Aurora Heights. Word spread quickly among various managers and staff. A high-ranking Global Airways executive was being held in a security office for alleged threats, an accusation that many suspected was bogus. People began to question the officers involved, especially Officer Miller. Those who had worked with Miller before knew he had a reputation for being overly aggressive, sometimes stepping beyond protocol. Rumors whispered that he'd once been reprimanded for excessive force, though details remained unconfirmed. As requests for surveillance footage were expedited, the staff began to sense that something big was about to break. The wheels of justice, which sometimes turned slowly, were beginning to spin faster. And Maya, trapped in that cramped waiting room, was about to find out that she wasn't alone. Far from it. Back in the security office, Maya sat rigidly in the metal chair, trying to ignore the ache in her lower back. She'd been waiting for over an hour now. Her flight was long gone, and any hope of making the SF meeting on time had evaporated. Finally, Sergeant Davies returned, a small file in hand. Officer Miller trailed behind him, but his previously confident demeanor seemed to have dimmed. Sergeant Davies cleared his throat, stepping toward Maya. "We reviewed the surveillance footage from the coffee kiosk," he said solemnly. Maya's heart hammered. Part of her worried. What if the footage had been obscured or incomplete? She needed it to be crystal clear to prove her innocence. "The footage shows the complainant cutting in line ahead of you," Sergeant Davies continued. "He appears agitated, but we see no interaction on your part that could be construed as a threat." Maya released a long-held breath, relief washing over her like a tidal wave. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick. "There's no audio, of course," Sergeant Davies added. "But from the body language, you didn't speak to him at all. You just waited politely." Officer Miller's face turned a shade paler. He maintained a rigid posture, avoiding Maya's gaze. Sergeant Davies pressed on. "We also had a brief word with the barista, who confirms your account. He heard no threatening statements." Maya nodded, her thoughts a whirlwind of gratitude, anger, and exhaustion. "So may I go now?" she asked softly. Sergeant Davies extended her boarding pass and ID. "You're free to go. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. The next step will be determining if the complainant filed a false report." Maya took back her documents and gave him a measured look. "An inconvenience is an understatement," she said. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what she just endured. She'd missed a critical flight, had her professional reputation jeopardized, and endured an hour of humiliation. All because of one man's lie and an officer's readiness to believe it. Sergeant Davies nodded. "You have every right to be upset." He paused. "I believe Global Airways management is aware of the situation. They've been contacting us." Maya almost sagged in relief. She could guess who was behind those calls. Her bosses, perhaps even David Chen. She knew Global Airways wouldn't let this slide quietly, especially if prejudice had played a role in her treatment. Still, it was time to leave this cramped room behind. She rose, shoulders squared, and prepared to step back into the airport corridors, completely unaware that her next steps would be the start of an even bigger reckoning. Maya emerged from the security office, her mind still reeling. She'd been vindicated, but anger and exhaustion weighed heavily on her. The busy hum of travelers outside felt surreal, as if she were returning from some parallel universe where her sense of dignity had been on trial. To her surprise, she spotted Leo Martinez from Global Airways' customer service department hurrying toward her. She'd seen him before at corporate gatherings and recognized his decisive stride. "Maya," he called. "Are you all right?" She mustered a tired smile. "Been better, but I'm free now." Leo's expression darkened. "This is unacceptable. Senior management is livid. They want to make sure you're okay, and they're coordinating to get you on the next flight out to SF." Maya nodded. She appreciated the support, but her shoulders slumped at the thought of everything she'd lost this morning. The original meeting was already underway, and her absence spoke volumes about how the day was going. As they spoke, Officer Miller stepped out of the security office. Maya felt her pulse spike. His gaze swept the hallway until it landed on her. Leo turned, noticing him as well, and tensed. Miller approached, looking noticeably less sure of himself than before. "Ms. Johnson," he began, "I'm glad we could clear things up." Maya stared at him, her jaw set. She didn't know which was worse, the false politeness he was now attempting, or the hostility he'd shown before. "No thanks to you," she replied quietly, forcing a level tone. Leo intervened, pulling out a business card. "Officer, I suggest you direct any further comments to Global Airways' legal department," he said, pressing the card into Miller's hand. His voice held a quiet authority, the subtext clear. This wasn't over. Miller's cheeks flushed, and he gave a tight nod. He turned to Maya one more time. "Ma'am, But Leo stepped between them. "We need to go," he said. "We'll let the official channels sort this out." Maya followed Leo down the corridor, her pulse finally slowing. Miller's presence receded into the background, though she could almost feel his stare drilling into her back. She couldn't predict the fallout of this altercation, but at least she was free, and she had the backing of her company. Yet a new question lodged in her mind. Why had this man singled her out so aggressively in the first place? She suspected the ugly root of racism, plain and simple, though she'd have to prove it. And if Miller had a history of such behavior, she suspected she wasn't the first, and might not be the last, to suffer his unfair scrutiny. One thing was certain. The next time Miller tried to exert his authority unjustly, he might discover that karma has a way of landing harder when it's long overdue. Leo guided Maya to Global Airways' private lounge, away from the noise and chaos of the concourse. Inside, plush seating and soft lighting provided a momentary sanctuary. A few passengers and employees glanced curiously as they entered, but Leo gently motioned them to give Maya space. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Yes, she's with me now," he said. "I'll let her speak to you directly." He handed the phone to Maya. On the other end was David Chen. "Maya!" Chen's voice boomed with concern. "Are you all right?" She sank into a chair, exhaling slowly. "I'm physically okay, but I've missed the meeting," she responded, frustration tinging her voice. Chen sighed heavily. "We're rescheduling some parts of it. Don't worry about that." "What happened?" Maya gave him a succinct account. The false accusation from a fellow traveler, the aggressive stance of Officer Miller, the humiliating detention, and the exoneration via security footage. She could almost feel Chen's anger crackle through the phone line. "We're filing a formal complaint with the airport," he stated. "And we've got internal documentation that you were singled out without reasonable cause. This is unacceptable. I'm also flying in tonight. I want to sit down with you to discuss next steps. For now, Leo will help you rebook. Take a moment to breathe, gather yourself, and then decide if you still feel like flying out today or if you need to push to tomorrow." Maya appreciated his understanding. She wasn't even sure she had the mental fortitude to endure another flight today, but her commitment to her work tugged at her. "I'll let you know shortly," she replied. "Thank you for the support, David." After the call ended, Leo gently asked if she needed anything. Water, coffee, a moment to vent. Maya shook her head. "I just want to check in with the SF team quickly, make sure they know I'm all right," she said. He nodded, stepping aside to give her privacy. As she dialed into a quick conference call with the West Coast group, exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Yet she spoke clearly and confidently, updating them on the situation. She refrained from delving into the painful details, not wanting to break down. All the while, she felt the sting of injustice burning in her chest. Had it not been for Global Airways' immediate intervention, she might still be sitting in that security office, labeled a threat. It was a sobering reminder of how quickly one's dignity could be jeopardized by a mix of prejudice and misplaced power. But what Miller didn't realize was that Maya Johnson wasn't just another passenger. She carried not just a Global Airways badge, but also the full weight of an executive network that took care of its own and held big sway within the airport's corridors of authority. Unbeknownst to Maya, wheels were already turning behind the scenes. Sergeant Davies, having reviewed the footage, drafted a formal report highlighting discrepancies in the complainant's accusations and the potential misconduct of Officer Miller. The man who'd lied about Maya threatening him was also under scrutiny. Filing a false complaint at an airport was no small matter. Meanwhile, airport administration officials received a strongly worded email from Global Airways' legal department. It detailed the incident, pointing out Maya's position within Global Airways, but also stressing that the company's concern wasn't just about a single executive. It was about the respect and rights of every passenger, especially those disproportionately targeted. The letter demanded a thorough investigation and immediate corrective actions. With the situation escalating rapidly, the airport's head of security, an experienced official named Anya Petrova, convened an urgent meeting. She had heard murmurings about Miller's past overreach, but had never received formal complaints substantial enough to warrant official discipline. This time, however, the evidence was compelling, and the corporate pressure was immense. Anya personally reviewed the security footage, wincing at the obvious discrepancy between the man's claim and the reality of what transpired at the coffee kiosk. Then she reviewed the interrogation logs, seeing how Miller had pursued Maya relentlessly with minimal cause. Her face hardened with frustration. Cases like this reflected poorly on the entire security team. She summoned Miller to her office. Their exchange was tense. Miller insisted he was following protocol, claiming Maya had acted suspicious, but Anya pointed to the footage, the witness accounts, and the man's blatant lie. Miller struggled to maintain his composure, sweating under her intense scrutiny. Anya left the meeting unconvinced by Miller's defense. She typed up a preliminary recommendation for disciplinary action, aware that this might be just the beginning. If further investigation uncovered a pattern of discrimination or improper conduct, Miller would be in even deeper trouble. One more phone call sealed the deal. A personal request from David Chen to speak with Anya. In a calm but firm tone, Chen expressed Global Airways' deep disappointment in Miller's unprofessionalism. He also noted that the matter had garnered widespread internal attention at Global Airways, insinuating that if the airport didn't rectify the situation swiftly, it could lead to public outrage and damage to the airport's reputation. By the end of the day, the stage was set for a dramatic consequence. Miller's days in that uniform were numbered, and the man who had lied faced a potential ban from flying that airline in the future. The hammer of accountability was about to drop hard. Later that evening, Maya found herself sitting in a quiet conference room at a nearby hotel adjacent to Aurora Heights, the same place where many Global Airways executives stayed during busy travel seasons. She had decided against flying to San Francisco that day. Her nerves were too frayed, and Chen had insisted on meeting in person to address the situation. Seated across from her were David Chen and Priya, her close colleague. Chen wore a crisp suit, exuding a calm authority tempered by concern. Priya's eyes shone with empathy and quiet anger. "You have every right to be furious," Chen said, leaning forward. "If you want to take legal action, Global Airways will back you fully." Maya clasped her hands, looking down at the table. Part of her yearned for justice, to make a public statement about how racial profiling could derail someone's life in an instant. Another part of her just felt exhausted. "I don't want this to become a circus," she admitted. "But I also don't want Miller to keep doing this to others. And that traveler's false accusations, did he just walk away from it?" Chen shook his head. "He's being questioned. This qualifies as filing a false report, especially in an airport context, which is serious. And from what we know, Officer Miller has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The head of security assured me they're taking this very seriously." Priya gave Maya a small smile. "You're such a force, Maya. This isn't just about you. If you speak up, it could help change a broken system." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. The day's events had drained her emotionally, and the outpouring of support made her feel both humbled and validated. "I want to do whatever ensures this doesn't happen to someone else, someone who doesn't have a powerful company behind them. If I were just another passenger, I might still be stuck in that interrogation room." Chen nodded gravely. "You're absolutely right. We'll be filing a complaint, not just on your behalf, but on behalf of all Global Airways passengers. We want to see revised training procedures for airport officers, especially regarding racial profiling." A flicker of determination sparked in Maya's tired eyes. "Then let's make it happen. Let's see if we can push for real change, not just a one-time punishment." The three of them talked late into the evening, formulating a plan. They would coordinate with airport officials, present the evidence, and ensure that Miller faced appropriate consequences. They also discussed how to bring about broader policy changes, potentially developed in partnership between Global Airways and the airport authority. Even as exhaustion weighed heavy on Maya, she felt a sense of purpose rekindling. Sometimes adversity ignites a fire for reform. In this case, that fire was about to illuminate long-standing issues in airport security and send a resounding message. Nobody should be mistreated because of the color of their skin, their gender, or any other factor that officers decide makes someone suspicious. For the first time all day, Maya felt a measure of relief. She still bore the emotional scars of the encounter, but she also carried hope that from this ordeal would come transformation. 2 weeks later, Maya had fully resumed her responsibilities at Global Airways. Though the events at Aurora Heights Airport still lingered in her mind, the corporate world moved fast. Deals were signed, new meetings arranged, and life pressed on. But she hadn't forgotten the injustice she faced. Word soon reached her desk. Officer Miller had been terminated from his position. Internal investigations had uncovered multiple complaints about his conduct, many involving men and women of color. Though each case had been brushed aside in the past, the scrutiny brought on by Maya's incident forced the airport to re-examine old reports. The pattern was undeniable. The airline's legal team informed Maya that the man who lied about her was under a travel ban with Global Airways, pending further legal action from the airport authorities. The false report and potential harassment charges could cost him hefty fines and possibly more, depending on how the prosecutor decided to move forward. Karma didn't stop there. The local news caught wind of the story. And while Maya declined to be interviewed on camera, the broader scandal of an airport cop mistreating a senior airline executive made headlines. Miller's face was splashed across screens, and the public outcry was swift and relentless. The airport faced intense scrutiny, prompting them to roll out a new training initiative focused on eliminating racial profiling, developed collaboratively with input from Global Airways. Maya watched from a distance, neither celebrating nor mourning Miller's firing. She felt relief that justice had been served, but also sadness that such biases existed, tarnishing the reputations of honest officers who simply wanted to keep passengers safe. She accepted a formal apology from the airport security department and worked with them on new policies to ensure travelers would face fewer instances of discriminatory treatment. In the end, Maya took solace in seeing real changes set in motion. Even if it had cost her a crucial meeting and caused her profound stress, the outcome might prevent future travelers, especially other Black women, from suffering the same ordeal. There was no triumphant victory dance, no parade, but there was resolution and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes fate and a little corporate muscle can tip the scales of justice in the right direction. And as for Officer Miller, he discovered just how swiftly retribution can land when you wield authority without fairness. With his career in shambles and legal repercussions looming, he learned the hard way that no job is worth losing your humanity and decency over. This story, inspired by real events, highlights the importance of fairness, accountability, and the need to confront bias at all levels. Chen shook his head. He's being questioned. This qualifies as filing a false report, especially in an airport context, which is serious. And from what we know, Officer Miller has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The head of security assured me they're taking this very seriously. Priya gave Maya a small smile. You're such a force, Maya. This isn't just about you. If you speak up, it could help change a broken system. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. The day's events had drained her emotionally, and the outpouring of support made her feel both humbled and validated. I want to do whatever ensures this doesn't happen to someone else, someone who doesn't have a powerful company behind them. If I were just another passenger, I might still be stuck in that interrogation room. Chen nodded gravely. You're absolutely right. We'll be filing a complaint, not just on your behalf, but on behalf of all Global Airways passengers. We want to see revised training procedures for airport officers, especially regarding racial profiling. A flicker of determination sparked in Maya's tired eyes. Then let's make it happen. Let's see if we can push for real change, not just a one-time punishment. The three of them talked late into the evening, formulating a plan. They would coordinate with airport officials, present the evidence, and ensure that Miller faced appropriate consequences. They also discussed how to bring about broader policy changes, potentially developed in partnership between Global Airways and the airport authority. Even as exhaustion weighed heavy on Maya, she felt a sense of purpose rekindling. Sometimes adversity ignites a fire for reform. In this case, that fire was about to illuminate long-standing issues in airport security and send a resounding message. Nobody should be mistreated because of the color of their skin, their gender, or any other factor that officers decide makes someone suspicious. For the first time all day, Maya felt a measure of relief. She still bore the emotional scars of the encounter, but she also carried hope that from this ordeal would come transformation. 2 weeks later, Maya had fully resumed her responsibilities at Global Airways, though the events at Aurora Heights Airport still lingered in her mind. The corporate world moved fast. Deals were signed, new meetings arranged, and life pressed on. But she hadn't forgotten the injustice she faced. Word soon reached her desk. Officer Miller had been terminated from his position. Internal investigations had uncovered multiple complaints about his conduct, many involving men and women of color. Though each case had been brushed aside in the past, the scrutiny brought on by Maya's incident forced the airport to re-examine old reports. The pattern was undeniable. The airline's legal team informed Maya that the man who lied about her was under a travel ban with Global Airways, pending further legal action from the airport authorities. The false report and potential harassment charges could cost him hefty fines and possibly more, depending on how the prosecutor decided to move forward. Karma didn't stop there. The local news caught wind of the story, and while Maya declined to be interviewed on camera, the broader scandal of an airport cop mistreating a senior airline executive made headlines. Miller's face was splashed across screens, and the public outcry was swift and relentless. The airport faced intense scrutiny, prompting them to roll out a new training initiative focused on eliminating racial profiling, developed collaboratively with input from Global Airways. Maya watched from a distance, neither celebrating nor mourning Miller's firing. She felt relief that justice had been served, but also sadness that such biases existed, tarnishing the reputations of honest officers who simply wanted to keep passengers safe. She accepted a formal apology from the airport security department and worked with them on new policies to ensure travelers would face fewer instances of discriminatory treatment. In the end, Maya took solace in seeing real changes set in motion. Even if it had cost her a crucial meeting and caused her profound stress, the outcome might prevent future travelers, especially other Black women, from suffering the same ordeal. There was no triumphant victory dance, no parade, but there was resolution and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes fate and a little corporate muscle can tip the scales of justice in the right direction. And as for Officer Miller, he discovered just how swiftly retribution can land when you wield authority without fairness. With his career in shambles and legal repercussions looming, he learned the hard way that no job is worth losing your humanity and decency over. This story, inspired by real events, highlights the importance of fairness, accountability, and the need to confront bias at all levels.